It all started on a quiet Saturday morning when I was raking leaves in my front yard. The neighborhood was calm, the kind of calm that only happens when everyone is tucked away inside their homes, enjoying their coffee. That was when I noticed her, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the subdivision. She walked down the street with her clipboard, oversized sunglasses, and that look of authority she carried everywhere. Even though nobody had ever voted her into any position. She stopped at the end of my driveway, tapping her pen against her papers with the kind of smug confidence that immediately put me on edge. I had lived in this house for almost 2 years and had never signed any agreement with the local HOA because my property wasn't even part of their jurisdiction. Still, Karen treated me like I was one of her subjects. That morning, she slipped a bright yellow envelope under my windshield wiper. Inside was a typed notice demanding $1,800 in fines for failure to maintain landscaping according to HOA standards and unauthorized exterior modifications. I laughed at first, thinking it had to be some kind of mistake. My grass was trimmed, my hedges neat, and the only modification I had made was planting a few rose bushes. But Karen didn't see it that way. She claimed the roses were not approved flora and that my paint color, a neutral beige that came with the house, was non-compliant with neighborhood guidelines. The bold print at the bottom of the page read, "Payment due in full within 14 days." I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the recycling bin. I wasn't about to hand over $1,800 to someone who had no actual authority over my property. But Karen wasn't done. Later that day, she stood on my lawn, phone in hand, pretending to document violations by snapping photos of my house from every angle. My neighbors peeked through their blinds, whispering to each other. I knew this was just the beginning of something ugly. The next week, another notice appeared, this time threatening legal action. Karen had slipped it under my door while I was at work. It claimed if I didn't pay, the HOA would place a lien on the property and pursue collections. At this point, I was more annoyed than worried. The HOA had no jurisdiction over me, and I was certain they couldn't touch my property. Still, Karen acted like she was the law of the land. On the 14th day, when no payment had been made, Karen escalated. I heard a knock on the door around noon. When I opened it, 2 police officers were standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable. Behind them, arms crossed and lips curled into a satisfied smirk, was Karen. She had actually called the cops on me. The officers explained that Karen had reported me for refusing to comply with HOA directives and disturbing the peace by creating a hostile environment. It was ridiculous, and they knew it. After checking my paperwork and confirming that my address was not even within HOA boundaries, they gave Karen a stern look. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. Karen insisted I was lying, claiming I had forged documents to avoid paying fines. She demanded the police force me to hand over $1,800 immediately. The officers told her this wasn't a civil matter they could enforce, and that was when Karen's smile cracked. She muttered under her breath, glaring at me as if I had just committed some unspeakable crime. As the police left, Karen shouted across the yard that this wasn't over, that she would make sure I regretted crossing her. Her threats didn't scare me, but I knew one thing for sure. Karen wasn't about to let this go. And I was right. What came next made the fine, the letters, and even a police visit look like child's play. Karen didn't waste any time regrouping after the embarrassment with the police. By the following week, the HOA board was suddenly buzzing with new enforcement actions. I knew she had rallied them, twisting the story to make it sound like I was some rogue homeowner openly defying the rules. What she didn't count on was the fact that several members of the board had never even realized my property wasn't under their jurisdiction. Karen had always presented herself as the authority in neighborhood matters, and most people never questioned her. But this time, her obsession with me had exposed how little she actually knew. Still, that didn't stop her from trying to drag me into their orbit. Flyers started showing up in mailboxes, written in Karen's unmistakable tone, warning the neighborhood about my refusal to comply with community standards. She painted me as a troublemaker, someone who threatened the safety and harmony of the subdivision. It might have been laughable if it wasn't so invasive. I caught her on multiple occasions standing on my property line with her phone, snapping photos while muttering to herself. One evening, I came home to find her measuring the distance from my mailbox to the curb with a tape measure, as if she was gathering evidence for some trial. The real kicker came during the next HOA meeting. Though I wasn't a member, Karen had added my name to the agenda under serious violations. Word got around, and curious neighbors packed the room. I didn't attend, but a friend who lived in the subdivision filled me in afterward. Karen had gone on a tirade, waving around copies of the fines, and insisting I was setting a dangerous precedent. She claimed that if I got away with ignoring the HOA, others would start questioning the rules too. Her voice reportedly grew shrill as she warned that the neighborhood would fall into chaos if I wasn't stopped. She even proposed raising everyone's dues to hire a private attorney to go after me. But that's when her plan started to backfire. Several neighbors spoke up, asking why HOA funds should be used to pursue someone who wasn't even a member. One man pointed out that my property had been annexed into the city years before the HOA was formed, making Karen's claims baseless. Another neighbor flat out asked why Karen was so obsessed with me in the first place. The room reportedly grew tense, with murmurs of discontent spreading. For the first time, Karen's authority was being openly challenged. She didn't take it well. My friend said her face turned red. Her voice cracked, and she eventually stormed out of the meeting before it even ended. But if I thought that would be the end of it, I was wrong. Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. She shifted tactics, turning the feud into something personal. Within days, anonymous complaints started arriving at City Hall. False reports about my property being overgrown, about trash piling up, about noise late at night. Inspectors came by twice, only to find nothing wrong. Each time they left, Karen was there, standing at the end of the block, watching. She was unraveling, but in her mind, she was doubling down. And as her desperation grew, so did her hostility. She was no longer content with letters and meetings. She was about to cross a line that would drag the whole neighborhood into the drama. Because the next move Karen made wasn't just aimed at me. It was designed to make everyone else in the community take her side against me. Karen's obsession reached a new level. It wasn't enough for her to target me alone. Now, she was determined to recruit the entire neighborhood into her crusade. It started with whispers. I noticed neighbors avoiding eye contact, conversations pausing when I walked past, and the occasional glare from across the street. Karen had been busy. She told anyone who would listen that I was refusing to pay mandatory dues, that I was freeloading off community services, while everyone else carried the weight. Of course, none of it was true. My property wasn't even part of their HOA, but her confident delivery convinced some people. Then came the flyers, printed on bright paper, taped to stop signs and slipped under doorways. They carried the same message. One neighbor is refusing to respect our rules, endangering property values for us all. Though my name wasn't printed, everyone knew who it was about. Karen even created a fake incident report, accusing me of storing hazardous materials in my garage. I discovered this when a city code officer appeared at my door, asking to inspect the property. He was apologetic when he found nothing out of order, but the damage had been done. Word spread quickly, and rumors flared up that I was hiding something. At the same time, Karen pushed the HOA board harder. She insisted they hire an attorney to file a lien against my home. The board resisted at first, but Karen's persistence wore them down. She argued that if they didn't act, I would embolden others to resist. Her words fed into their fear of losing control. Soon enough, a letter arrived from the HOA's lawyer, threatening legal action. I knew it was empty. The HOA had no jurisdiction, no contract, no legal leg to stand on. Still, the letter was intimidating, designed to scare me into paying. But instead of folding, I contacted an attorney of my own. Within days, he drafted a firm response citing property records and city maps, proving once and for all that my address was outside HOA boundaries. I thought that would finally put an end to it. It didn't. Karen wasn't satisfied with legal arguments or facts. She thrived on drama, and when the law didn't side with her, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Late at night, I started noticing her car creeping past my house, headlights off. I'd find footprints across my lawn in the morning, even when it hadn't rained. One morning, I discovered a large HOA lien, do not remove sign staked into my yard. It looked official, but was nothing more than a scare tactic Karen had created herself. By now, the neighborhood was split. Some people were tired of her antics, fed up with the chaos she caused. Others believed her stories and sided with her, convinced I was a threat to the community. Tension simmered, turning what had once been a quiet street into a Cold War battleground. And then Karen went too far. She decided that if the HOA and the law wouldn't back her, she would create her own form of justice. One afternoon, while I was away at work, she trespassed onto my property. She spray-painted large red letters across my driveway. HOA, deadbeat. That was the final straw. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was vandalism, a crime. When I called the police to file a report, several neighbors came out to watch. And for the first time, the power shifted. People saw with their own eyes that Karen had crossed a line no one could excuse. But Karen wasn't about to apologize. She doubled down, insisting she was protecting the neighborhood. The problem was, now the HOA board had to decide. Were they really going to offend her, or were they finally going to admit she had gone too far?